My name is Madison Carter, and I'm 25 years old. I live in a small town now, far from the city, where my name used to mean something else. People here know me for my work with children, for the community center I run, for the warm smile I try to carry every day. But no one here knows the full story, not the way I do. Because to understand who I am today, you'd have to go back 13 years. Back to the house I was thrown out of. Back to a stormy evening that I will never forget. I don't tell this story often, but when I do, it's not to make people feel sorry for me. It's because I know that there's someone out there, maybe a girl like I once was, who thinks she's alone, who thinks what's happening to her is normal. And I need her to know the truth. I need her to know that silence isn't strength, it's survival. And survival is not the same as living. Back then, people thought my family was perfect. We lived in a beautiful two-story house in a quiet, upscale neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina. Our lawn was always trimmed. The flower beds were always blooming. My parents, Martin and Linda Carter, owned a successful chain of luxury home decor stores called Carter Interiors. They were the kind of couple who smiled in magazine spreads, sponsored charity galas, and waved at everyone in church. Elegant, impressive, unreachable. And yet, behind that elegant front door, the air inside was colder than any winter night. My younger sister, Emma, was 2 years younger than me. She was the golden child. She played piano with perfect posture. She folded napkins like a professional. She never talked back. People adored her and my parents worshipped her. But me? I was the opposite. I laughed too loud. I ran too fast. I asked too many questions. I wasn't delicate or graceful. I was inconvenient. I remember once overhearing my mother on the phone with a friend. She said, "Emma's our little angel. Madison is, well, Madison tries." That one sentence, it lodged itself into my chest like a splinter that never came out. But nothing hurt more than the day everything truly broke. It was an early spring afternoon, the kind where the clouds gather fast and the sky changes color before you even realize a storm is coming. Emma and I were playing inside, a game of chase, laughter echoing down the hallway. We weren't supposed to run indoors, but for that moment, we were just kids, free from the usual pressure of perfection. I turned the corner too quickly and bumped into Emma. Our arms tangled. She stumbled back, and her elbow clipped a tall glass vase standing by the fireplace. It wobbled for a second, then fell, and shattered. A sharp, piercing sound ripped through the house like a warning bell. That vase, a narrow, crystal piece imported from Europe, was worth $2,000. I knew that even then. Not because I understood money, but because I had heard my father boast about it to guests. I froze. Emma froze. We stared at the mess in horror, tiny glass shards glinting on the hardwood floor. Before I could even move, I heard the pounding of footsteps. And just like that, the storm outside was no longer the only one coming. The footsteps belonged to my father, Martin Carter. He stormed into the living room with fire in his eyes. His neatly ironed shirt clung to his chest from the humidity, but his face was tight, sharp, dangerous. His eyes scanned the floor, then snapped to me, not Emma, not both of us, just me. "What did you do?" he barked. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. My voice felt stuck behind my ribs. Emma tried to speak. It was an accident, but he cut her off with a raised hand. Not another word. He stepped toward me, looming like a shadow. "Do you have any idea how much that vase cost?" $2,000. 2,000. He said it like each syllable carried the weight of a hammer. "I didn't mean to," I whispered, shaking. He didn't care. Before I could say anything more, his hand flew across my face. The slap was so hard, I felt it crack in my teeth. My vision blurred. My skin burned. I stumbled backward, one hand to my cheek, my legs trembling beneath me. I looked around, dazed, eyes stinging. My heart cried for help. For someone. For her. My mother, Linda, was standing at the hallway entrance, arms crossed, lips tight. Her makeup perfect. Her silence louder than thunder. I looked right at her, pleaded with my eyes, but she turned her head slightly, refusing to meet my gaze. I'll never forget that moment. That stillness. That choice. Then she moved. Without a word, she walked toward me, fast and sharp. Her nails dug into my arm as she grabbed me. Out, she said coldly. Mom. I gasped, but she didn't flinch. She dragged me toward the front door, yanking open the handle so hard it slammed against the wall. Rain had already begun to fall outside, dark clouds swirling overhead. The air smelled of wet earth and something worse, fear. No daughter of mine destroys this home and stays in it, she hissed. And then she shoved me out. I stumbled onto the front porch, my shoes half off, the slap still burning on my cheek. I turned around, blinking through the downpour. She stared at me for 1 second longer, that blank, disgusted face, and then slammed the door shut. Just like that, I was no longer their daughter. The wind howled around me. I was soaked within seconds. My hair stuck to my skin. My legs wouldn't stop shaking. 12 years old. No phone. No jacket. No one. I remember staring at that front door for what felt like forever, hoping someone would open it, hoping it had all been a mistake. But it wasn't. And no one came. I started to walk without knowing where I was going. My arms were wrapped around my soaked t-shirt, my feet sliding on the pavement. I was trying to breathe, but each step felt heavier than the last. By the time the truck pulled up beside me, my lips were blue and my body felt numb. The window rolled down slowly, and a voice, one I hadn't heard in a while, said my name like it mattered. Madison? Madison? I looked up, shivering. My vision was hazy from the rain, but I recognized that voice immediately. Uncle Thomas. He was already out of the truck before I could say another word. He didn't ask what I was doing out in the storm. He didn't lecture me or hesitate. He just peeled off his jacket and wrapped it around my shoulders. It smelled like coffee and old cologne, like comfort. Get in the truck, sweetheart, he said gently, guiding me to the passenger side. You're coming with me. The warmth of the truck's interior felt unreal, like a dream. The heater hummed low. My wet hair dripped onto the seat. Uncle Thomas didn't say much on the drive, only glanced at me once, his jaw tight, eyes glassy. But that silence wasn't empty. It was safe. His house was nothing like my parents'. It was small and cluttered, with mismatched furniture and a crooked welcome mat. But the moment I stepped inside, I could breathe. The lights were warm. The air smelled like cinnamon and books, and a golden retriever named Max wagged his tail like I was already home. Uncle Thomas handed me dry clothes and pointed to the bathroom. Take your time. Hot shower's yours. I'll make cocoa. I stood in front of the mirror afterward and saw the red mark on my cheek, the outline of my father's hand still glowing. My throat tightened, but I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, I curled up on a couch under 3 blankets with a steaming mug in my hands and Max curled at my feet. Uncle Thomas didn't press for answers. He just sat across from me, holding his own cup, watching the rain hit the windows. After a while, he said, "You don't have to go back. Not unless you want to." I didn't answer out loud, but inside, I knew I never would. The days that followed were quiet and gentle. Uncle Thomas took time off work to be with me. He told my school I'd transferred and enrolled me in one across town. He even found a child therapist who met me once a week in a cozy office filled with board games and crayons. For the first time in years, I was just a kid. No one yelled when I spilled juice. No one glared if I left my shoes at the door. Uncle Thomas left the night light on in the hallway. He always made sure I had something warm for lunch. He remembered my birthday, even got me a small cake with my name spelled right. At school, I was quiet at first. The new kids didn't know me. I didn't speak much in class. But then came Julia, a girl with curly hair, colorful pens, and the loudest laugh in 6th grade. She sat next to me one day and offered me a purple pen and half her sandwich. "I like your shoes," she said. "They're old," I replied. "That's okay. So are mine." And just like that, I wasn't invisible anymore. We made silly doodles during lunch and whispered about our favorite books. I didn't tell her everything. Not yet, but I smiled more when she was around. For a while, it was enough. Uncle Thomas started picking me up from school. He always asked, "How was your day?" And he always listened to the answer. One night, he tucked an envelope under my plate at dinner. It was from the school, a notice that I'd been selected to read a poem at the winter recital. "Want me to be there?" he asked with a grin. "Only if you clap really loud," I joked. "You got it." And when that day came, he did. Even though I stood at the very back of the stage, barely lit, reading 4 short lines, he clapped like I was the star. That night, as we drove home, I looked out at the dark sky and whispered to myself, This is what home is supposed to feel like." Years passed. I got taller. My hair grew longer. The mark on my cheek disappeared. But some scars don't show on the surface. Some stay buried, quiet, heavy, shaping how you breathe, how you walk into a room, how much space you allow yourself to take up. Still, with Uncle Thomas and Max, I began to build a life. I didn't just survive, I started to heal. School became easier. I found my rhythm. Julia remained my best friend, and her family even invited me over for birthdays and movie nights. I never told them the whole story. Just pieces. Just enough. Uncle Thomas never pushed. He let me come to terms with it all on my own. Some days I was angry. Other days I was numb. And sometimes I felt like I missed my parents, not for who they were, but for who I had once hoped they'd be. At 16, I started volunteering at a youth center. It was small, a few folding tables, mismatched chairs, and a lot of chipped paint, but it felt alive. I helped with homework clubs, sorted donated clothes, served meals. Kids came in with eyes like mine, quiet, tired, unsure. I understood them. I didn't have all the answers, but I listened. And sometimes that was enough. By 19, I got accepted to a local community college on a scholarship. I cried the day the letter arrived, not because of the name on the paper, but because it was mine. Mine. Not my father's. Not something fake my mother framed. It was me. Just me. I started working part-time at the same youth center, now helping run the after-school program. I was building something. Slowly. Carefully. And then one evening, a quiet Wednesday in early spring, my phone buzzed. I was sitting on Uncle Thomas's living room floor, sorting old journals into boxes. I hadn't opened them in years. Little notebooks filled with scribbles, memories, pain I wasn't sure I was ready to read again. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in over a decade. Emma. My fingers froze. I hadn't spoken to my sister since the day I was thrown out. I didn't even know she had my number. I hesitated, but then I tapped accept. Madison? Her voice was small. Unsure. "It's me, Emma." I didn't speak. "I found your journals," she continued. "The ones you left behind. In the attic." My throat tightened. "You weren't supposed to read those." "I know. But I had to." I had to know the truth. Silence passed between us. Then she whispered, "They're doing it to me, too." That sentence shattered something inside me. "What do you mean?" "They won't let me choose anything. They say being a photographer is a waste. Dad wants me to take over the business. Mom keeps trying to set me up with some rich family son. It's like I don't belong to myself." I leaned back, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. All these years, I thought Emma was their chosen one. The perfect one. The one they loved. But she wasn't loved. She was used. "I don't want to become like them," she said, voice shaking. "I don't want to be cold and bitter. I want to feel free. Like you." I swallowed hard. "You think I'm free?" "You are. You got away." Another pause. Then I asked, "Do you want to leave?" She didn't answer right away. But then, in the softest voice I'd ever heard, she said, "Yes. I don't know where to go." I looked around the living room. Max was snoring on the couch. Uncle Thomas was in the kitchen, humming as he made tea. "Come here," I said quietly. "We'll figure it out." 2 days later, Emma showed up on our doorstep with one suitcase, her camera bag, and red-rimmed eyes. Uncle Thomas didn't say much. He just nodded as I explained. Family helps family, he said, even when the rest of the world turns its back. At first, having Emma around felt strange. We hadn't been close in years. When we were younger, we were always pitted against each other, the golden child and the mistake. But now there was no pretense. No piano recitals. No choreographed smiles for holiday cards. Just two sisters sitting at the same kitchen table, trying to remember what it meant to trust. We started slow, sharing quiet breakfasts, taking long walks with Max. I caught her watching me sometimes, like she was trying to figure out how I had survived. One afternoon, as we folded laundry, Emma said, "I used to think you were the problem." "I know," I replied softly. "They made me believe it." I nodded. "Me too." She looked at me for a long time. "I'm sorry." And for the first time since she showed up, I saw her walls begin to crack. We started talking late at night about things we were never allowed to say out loud. About how our parents turned every mistake into a weapon. How love in our house came with conditions. How even praise felt like pressure. One evening, I brought out a box of my old journals. I wrote everything. I told her. Even the parts one wanted to forget. Together, we sat on the living room floor, flipping through pages. Emma pointed out details I had buried. "Remember this birthday?" she asked, tracing a line I'd written. "Mom let me invite 10 friends. You got none." I had forgotten. We started creating a timeline. A clear, brutal record of every time they had used us, for appearances, for control, for their version of success. Then Emma said something that made me sit up straight. "You know how Dad always bragged about how spotless the company books were?" I nodded slowly. "Well," she said, lowering her voice, "they're not." She walked to her suitcase and pulled out her camera bag. From a side pocket, she handed me her phone. I took pictures from Dad's office. He doesn't know. I found tax documents, some look fake. Invoices that don't match. And emails. He's been paying people off. I scrolled through the images, my stomach tightening. Numbers didn't add up. Vendor names were missing. Dates had been changed. And then an email chain with a man named Brent talking about clearing audits quietly. "This isn't just bad business," I whispered. "This is fraud." We both sat there, stunned. All our lives, Martin Carter walked around like the world owed him something. Like we owed him something. And now, in our hands, we held proof that his empire, Carter Interiors, wasn't just cold. It was corrupt. It wasn't enough just to know. Not anymore. I opened my laptop and created a new email account under a fake name. Then I drafted a message to a few local journalists. I didn't say much. Just enough to make them curious. "You might want to look into Victor Carter of Carter Interiors. His books aren't as clean as they seem." I attached a few of the photos. At the same time, I remembered someone from childhood, Brenda, the front desk clerk at one of the stores. She had always smiled at me when others didn't. I found her on social media and reached out from a burner profile, asking vague questions. She called the next day. "I don't know who you are," she said, "but I've worked for the Carters for 15 years. And let me tell you, he treats the staff like machines. No overtime. No breaks. Fired 3 people last year for asking about their bonuses." I wrote it all down. By the end of that week, we had a mountain of evidence: emotional abuse, financial fraud, workplace exploitation. And for the first time since I was 12 years old, I wasn't scared. I was ready. It didn't take long. 3 days after I sent those emails, a small article appeared on a local blog. It was quiet, cautious. Just a few paragraphs questioning inconsistencies in Carter Interior's financial reports. It mentioned anonymous sources. A hint of fraud. A whisper. But whispers spread fast, especially in a city that thrives on polished reputations. By the end of the week, 2 more outlets had picked up the story. And this time, they named names. Decor Dynasty under fire. Martin Carter's finances face scrutiny. Inside the illusion, former employees speak out against Carter Interiors. Emma and I watched the headlines from Uncle Thomas's living room, huddled around the laptop like it was a campfire. We read each word slowly, carefully. "They don't know it was us yet," Emma said. They will, I replied. Soon. And I was right. 3 days later, my phone rang. I was at the youth center helping a 10-year-old finish his science poster. I saw the screen and froze. I let it ring.
Once. Twice.
Then I picked up. Madison, she snapped, her voice sharp and cold, like nothing had changed. Like 13 years hadn't passed. Like she still owned the air I breathed. I didn't speak. What's going on? She demanded. Are you involved in this nonsense in the media? Still, I said nothing. You think you're clever? You think you're hurting us? You're just ruining your own name. That made me laugh, not a happy laugh, but the kind that comes when something finally breaks loose. You ruined my name, I said calmly, the night you left me in a thunderstorm with nothing but a wet t-shirt and a bruise on my face. There was silence. Then, surprisingly, her tone softened, fake sugar over poison. It's not too late to come home, Madison. We can fix this. I already did, I said. I threw everything away the night you did. And I don't want it back. I hung up before she could respond. That evening, Uncle Thomas sat on the porch, reading the latest headline out loud. Carter Interiors to face full IRS audit, alleged cover UPS spanning years. Their investors were pulling out. Employees were talking. Vendors were distancing. A career that once gleamed like polished marble was now crumbling under the weight of its own deception. You sure this is what you want? Uncle Thomas asked me gently. I nodded. They taught me that power is everything. I'm just showing them what it feels like to lose it. Emma sat beside me and leaned her head on my shoulder. We're not doing this just to destroy them, she said softly. We're doing this to free ourselves. And she was right. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was closure. Around that time, Emma and I came up with something we hadn't planned, a vision that came not from anger, but from a need to do something better. We wanted to open a center, a space for kids like us, kids who had been called too much, too loud, too clumsy, kids who had been controlled, dismissed, or silenced. We called it Phoenix House because we were rising from fire, from ash, from everything they burned in us. We shared the idea with the shelter I worked at, launched a small fundraiser, reached out to old teachers, community groups, volunteers. To our shock, people cared. Donations came in. Offers to paint, to build, to stock bookshelves. Survivors shared our vision. Parents who had once been children like us. We weren't just exposing darkness anymore. We were creating light. The legal process didn't move fast, it never does. But when it moved, it was loud. The IRS opened a full investigation into Carter Interiors. Auditors uncovered a trail of altered invoices, offshore transfers, and false deductions going back nearly a decade. The business was placed under a financial freeze. Bank accounts were locked. Properties were flagged for seizure. But the real victory didn't come until the criminal charges were filed. Martin Carter, the man who once slapped his daughter across the face for breaking a vase, was indicted on multiple counts of tax fraud, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. I attended the arraignment hearing. He walked into that courtroom in a wrinkled suit, shoulders sunken. The cameras flashed. The public stared. But all I saw was the man who looked at me like I had ruined his life, when all I had done was exist outside of his control. And then there was Linda. They didn't charge her for the money. But I pressed charges separately, not for fraud, but for child endangerment and physical abuse. My lawyer laid out everything. The night I was 12. The slap. The rain. The way she grabbed me and threw me outside like I was trash. We submitted medical notes from the therapist. Statements from Uncle Thomas. Even my childhood journals. And this time, someone listened. The judge looked directly at her and said, "You failed as a parent, and worse, you punished your child for your own image. This isn't just neglect. This is cruelty." Linda Carter was sentenced to 4 years in state prison, no possibility of early parole. Martin Carter received 7 years for financial crimes and another 18 months added for evidence tampering and workplace violations. They were led away in handcuffs. Together. The reporters called it the fall of the Carter dynasty. But I called it something else. Accountability. Emma, and I stood outside the courthouse. She held my hand. We didn't cry. We didn't smile. We just stood tall. They never thought this day would come, she said. They built their lives on pretending, I replied. And we ended it by telling the truth. The weeks after the trial were quiet. Carter Interiors officially shut down. Former employees, like Brenda, received back pay settlements through class action lawsuits. The stores disappeared from the city like dust after demolition. No one spoke their names in admiration anymore. Their mansion? Sold off to cover debts. Their social circle?
Gone.
Their image? Erased. And I didn't feel sorry, because for the first time the law saw what I had lived through. And it responded not with silence but with justice. The day Phoenix House opened felt like stepping into a dream I didn't know I was allowed to have. The building was modest, a renovated community center with fresh paint and second-hand furniture, but to us, it was a sanctuary. The name shone across the front in hand-painted letters, surrounded by flowers planted by volunteers. Inside, the walls were covered with soft colors, shelves of books, and drawings from kids who had already begun to call it theirs. We didn't want it to be a shelter. We wanted it to be a starting line. A place where children like me, like Emma, could breathe, speak, grow, and be heard. Uncle Thomas gave a short speech at the ribbon cutting. His voice cracked when he called us his girls. Then he handed me the scissors and stepped back. I looked out at the small crowd, neighbors, teachers, former youth center staff, and even a few quiet kids hiding behind their parents' legs. And I said the only thing that felt true. I was once a girl thrown out into the storm. And for a long time, I believed I had no worth, that I was only ever going to be what they told me I was, a mistake. But I was wrong, because here I am. And here you are. And if no one ever told you this before, you matter. You're not too much. You're not too broken. You're just in the wrong place. And Phoenix House is here to change that. People clapped. Some cried. But the moment that stayed with me came later, when a little girl named Tessa, no older than 10, tugged at my sleeve. She looked down when she spoke. My mom says I ruin everything. I knelt to her level. You don't ruin anything, Tessa, I said gently. You just haven't been heard by the right people yet. She blinked, then smiled just a little. And I knew right then this mattered. Emma, camera around her neck, snapped pictures all day. She captured laughter, hugs, kids sitting in reading nooks or building pillow forts. In one photo, Uncle Thomas is helping a child tie their shoes while Max, now grayer, but just as gentle, naps beside them. That night, Emma handed me a print of a photo she had taken. The three of us, her, me, and Uncle Thomas, standing in front of Phoenix House, arms wrapped around each other. They'd hate this picture, she joked. I laughed. Good. We sat on the porch under the stars. For the first time in a long time, the world felt still. Not empty, just settled. Emma leaned back. Do you think they'll ever change? I thought about it. Then I shook my head. Maybe. But I'm not waiting around to find out. And I meant it. The scandal didn't go away for Martin and Linda. Even after prison, their name was never the same. The empire they built on lies vanished like it was never there. And I didn't need revenge anymore. I had freedom. I had peace. I had purpose. I look back now not with bitterness, but with power. The girl they threw into the rain became the woman who built a roof for others. And the family I thought I lost? I built a better one. One that chose me. One that believed in me. One that never made me feel like I had to be someone else just to be loved. If this story moved you or made you think, please consider liking the video, leaving a comment with your thoughts, and subscribing to the channel for more powerful stories like this one. Your support helps us continue sharing voices that deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching.